Last video, David shared his thoughts on 5 things he wished he'd known when we started cruising from the perspective of someone who's completed a world circumnavigation. I definitely agree with everything he said, but I have my own list too, and today I want to share my perspective. So welcome, I'm Amy from Out Chasing Stars, and I'd like to invite you to sit back, relax, and let's talk boats. In 2008, my dad took David out on his very first sail as an adult. I'd grown up around boats my whole life, from the offshore supply vessels in my grandpa's company, to my dad's dinner cruise ships, to sailing dinghies at summer camp, and the various sailboats owned by my parents and uncle throughout my lifetime. Once David caught the sailing bug, we did charters in the Caribbean, got our captain's license, and then took off to sail the world. Despite all of that experience, our first night out at sea on Starry Horizons, I was nervous as hell. It was pitch black. We were on a brand new bare bones boat. We were in the notorious Bay of Biscay, and David had never sailed overnight before. I was so scared I wanted to cry. But as we traversed the miles and crossed oceans, I quickly grew to think of us differently. We were a team, me, David, and Starry Horizons, and we are more capable than I thought we were. Things broke and we learned to fix them. When we first started, docking the boat was terrifying, but I kicked David out of the helm and I did it over and over and over again until I was comfortable with it. We have project lists for things we'd like to do on Starry Horizons, and we could pay someone to do them, but we don't. Even if it's something we don't know how to do, we take the time and learn how to do it and do it right. Cruising constantly pushes your boundaries. But at the same time, we overcome those boundaries and tackle our preconceived notions about ourselves. When we bought Starry Horizons, I sold my business. I was worried that I would be bored while cruising. I was going from working long hours with high stakes and making important decisions to an untraditional lifestyle. Because David had done most of the planning for buying and outfitting Starry Horizons, I did find myself struggling, but only for a little while. Boats take time. There's always a list of things to be done on Starry Horizons, and cruisers pick up hobbies. Sometimes they're cruising adjacent, like snorkeling, spearfishing, shell collecting. Sometimes they're side hustles, like stock trading, writing, or photography. And sometimes they're just for fun, like reading and watching TV or creating art. Just as a newly retired person might find themselves at loose ends, cruisers might worry about how to fill their days. But there's plenty to do, whether you choose to do something for pleasure or for profit. Speaking of new hobbies to pick up, one thing I wish I'd learned before cruising was French. We picked up our boat in France, and that's obviously a great place to speak French. But throughout our circumnavigation, we stopped in a lot of places on the traditional cruising route where speaking French was very common. There are French territories in the Caribbean, like St. Martin and Guadeloupe, or in the South Pacific, like French Polynesia and New Caledonia. There are also independent countries where French is very common, such as Madagascar or Seychelles. In all of these places, we didn't have trouble getting around when it mattered. Officials and shopkeepers usually spoke English, and where that didn't work, we used hand gestures and our phones to translate. But I would love to be fluent in a foreign language. As an aside, a general course like Duolingo or Rosetta Stone isn't going to teach you nautical terms, so I recommend picking up French for cruisers and Spanish for cruisers. When we first crossed an ocean, David had it stuck in his head that we needed some cans of ham. If we had a disaster and ran out of food, ham would save us. But of course, that's not true. One of my many jobs on the boat is all things food related. Planning, provisioning, processing anything we catch, cooking all of our meals, and organizing potlucks and cocktail hours. It's a production. I often have to limit to myself to what I can carry away from the store or what I can find on the shelves. But the good news is that people have healthy diets all over the world. The most difficult thing to provision is fresh produce. But if you are anywhere that people live, you can find fresh food. We've bought or traded in some of the most remote islands in the world to have fresh food available. Only what the locals can part with, and only giving them what they need in return. We don't carry booze or cigarettes for trading, but remote villages often need staples like rice, flour, or clothing. Throughout our circumnavigation, we ate meat every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. I was always able to fill our freezer with chicken, pork, and beef. Now, we're leaning more towards eating plant-based meals, so a freezer full of our favorite healthy meats will last us an entire cruising season. While I do stock twice as much food as we need for a passage, I also don't have to resort to canned ham. Our boat has generous fridge and freezer space, and I love to buy produce locally. A skill that comes in handy while cruising is to make do with what you have, and that applies very well in the galley. Learning how to be creative with your ingredients or make staples such as bread, yogurt, or granola is a great thing to learn and a fun additional hobby to have. The last thing I wish I'd known before cruising is that the cruising lifestyle is not a magic switch to being healthy. Yes, we get a lot of fresh air and outdoor activities, but the lack of routine can destroy healthy habits. Our days at sea are physically sedentary. Seasickness makes me lazy. Even at anchor, we might go for days without getting off the boat. I used to be a runner, and sometimes I still do run, but I definitely don't train for marathons anymore. Putting sneakers on and stepping out the front door is a lot easier than waking up early to run before it gets hot in the tropics, getting the dinghy down, motoring to the beach, getting wet and sandy up to your knees, putting your sneakers on, and then running along a half-mile beach 10 times, all while sand rubs between your toes. It took us a few years to recommit to daily exercise. We're lucky in that we're young and healthy cruisers, and we want to keep it that way. Additionally, the cruising community often enables vices. Overeating was difficult for me to control for a while, and sometimes the social calendar revolves around sundowners every night. But it doesn't have to be that way. David doesn't drink anymore, and in the last few years of cruising, I've lost weight while I relearned how to manage my food habits. I hope you've enjoyed this look from my perspective of what we wish we'd known before setting sail. What do you think about my list versus David's list? Is there a topic you would like to get my perspective on instead of David's? Let us know in the comments. If you like this video, please subscribe up here. If you want to watch David's thoughts, click the video down here. Thanks for watching. See y'all another day, another bay.